Welcome to the Association of Rhode Island Authors panel of memoir writers, where four different storytellers that either captured a life event or wrote about one that changed our life or changed someone else's life, or we wrote about a memorable childhood. Everyone has an important story to tell, but should yours appear in print? That's the difference between being an oral storyteller and the memoirist who writes one. Granted, the craft is difficult. The reward allows you to write your history on your terms. We're here to tell you that you can write your story too, but you probably have questions and we hope to answer them. What about exposing family secrets? And does the fear of a lawsuit cross your mind? And what's the fine line between a rant about somebody and a balanced story? And how much time does it take to write a memoir? Well, questions regarding this genre are varied, as are the stories that were revealed to the world. We're going to tell you about our path to writing a memoir. But please remember, you have to tell the deepest truths when you sit down to write yours. Your reader will know when you're holding back. I'm Judith Glenn, and I'm here to answer the question, how much time did it take me to write a memoir? A little about my book first. The Street or Me, a New York story, chronicles my remarkable 2-year friendship with a New York City drunk and homeless and dying woman. We met in my Hell's Kitchen neighborhood. I also live in Providence, and I live in New York City. Initially, I just wanted to help her restore her life, but more importantly, I didn't want her to die in the gutter. I wanted her to die with dignity. Little did I know that after our first hello, 2 years later, I'd wind up taking her home to her family in Italy, who know nothing about her life on the streets. This memoir is raw with vivid scenes of Michelle's life and equally vivid scenes with my mother, who disapproved of me most of my adult life, which was reinforced by my fixation with my homeless friend. There were few people who understood me and my devotion to Michelle. I questioned myself all along the way, wondering if I was as addicted to her as she was to her addiction. To help me cope, as I was drawn deeper and deeper into her life, I turned to my computer late at night to write about her street life and my life trying to help her. So how long did it take me to write a memoir like mine? It took me 20 years. After I returned Michelle to her family in Italy, I printed out our story and put it on a closet shelf. I had to live a life, my life, and it didn't include writing a memoir. However, when I finished writing my first novel, I missed writing a story. So I dusted off my memoir, I rewrote it, I went to workshops where I had writing colleagues help me, I self-published it, and now The Street of Me is a reality. I don't suggest waiting that long to get yours on paper, but if you do, you're not alone. So here with me now are other writers who tackled the memoir and want to tell you their story. Katie Cattell, who you met here, is the author of Breathe, which is the story of motherhood, the death of 2 of her children, lawsuits, and that of a family in the face of unspeakable tragedy. They live on a picnic island, but her favorite writing space is in their yurts on the Oregon coast. Kelly's been published in numerous magazines and anthologies, plus her memoir has won her a number of awards.
Can you hear? Is that better if I talk like that? Can everyone hear me right now? All right, there's nothing worse than not being able to hear, right?
Did you hear me?
So I apologize. I did a TED Talk a couple weeks ago and I had to memorize it. So I didn't memorize this little spiel I want to tell you now, but I have a tendency to ad-lib and we only have 5 minutes, so I am going to read, and I'm sorry. that I didn't memorize this. But I grew up on Aquidneck Island in Middletown, right over there. And after college, I headed off to join the Peace Corps in Jamaica, where I met my husband, Andy. And he was from the next town to Newport in Oregon, and I am from the next town to Newport here in Middletown. So my mother called us right away, East meets West. We married, we moved to San Francisco, and then we finally settled down in Oregon, where 8 years later, we had our fourth child. His name was Noah. We both had good jobs. I was a fish biologist, and our feet were planted firmly on the prescriptive path that society defines as success, right? We had 2 boys, 2 girls, matched sets of kids. We were surrounded by a large, loving family. My husband is the youngest of 8 kids. And there was no reason to think that we wouldn't just continue contributing to our 401k accounts, raise our kids, and retire someday, just as planned, right? And every story is about change, as you know. And that was our perfect world until, such a horrible word, until 15 months later, on August 10th, 1997, when Noah was run over in my in-laws' driveway by my 16-year-old niece. And then 9 months later, our next baby, Jonah, was stillborn. So, pardon? Oh, that's what it said. As Judith alluded, my book is right here. It's subtitled A Memoir of Motherhood, Grief, and Family Conflict. And now you can begin to see why. The year that Noah and Jonah both died was a terrible, terrible year that completely redefined life for me. And I literally forgot how to breathe. Happily, we did succeed in giving birth to another son, Isaiah, and then to our daughter Bella, who I like to call the exclamation point at the end of our family. But because of the lessons that we learned from Isaiah's birth, we ended up filing a medical malpractice lawsuit against our doctor in Oregon for the death of Jonah. And we prevailed. But at that trial, my sister-in-law, the mother of my niece who ran over our son, voluntarily testified against us. My niece never accepted accountability for her actions, and our extended family, those other 7 siblings that my husband had, ultimately fell apart. I always say, if it wasn't my life, I would never believe it. I would never believe that people would act this way, but they do. Truth is stranger than fiction. And that's the family conflict part of this book. As for the rest of the motherhood and grief portions, I've had 13 pregnancies. I've delivered 7 babies into this world, and we have 5 living children. In addition to Noah and Jonah, I've also had more miscarriages than I like to count. Miscarriage and stillbirth are topics we rarely talk about. They're largely considered taboo in our society, and I believe, for one, that we should shatter that silence. So they say there's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you, and for me, this was that story. For a decade or so, I held it cleaved to my heart, and I didn't talk about these babies much. I always knew that someday I'd write a book, but I certainly never dreamed that life would place this particular tale in my hands. Eventually, I sat down and I started writing the story of my babies, all of them. And it took me 7 years, a little less than Judith. But finally, their stories are out in the world. My book is here, called Breathe, and I wrote it to tell the story of my sons and my babies, as well as to help other people. Because I believe that's the #1 reason why we should share our stories, to help each other. It's important that we share what I like to call our war stories, right? We don't all go off to war, but we fight our battles every day right here on the home front. With family and friends and in-laws and careers. Marriage, right? All of these things can wound us and leave their scars. But by sharing our stories, by opening ourselves up and daring to be vulnerable, we find others who have walked in our shoes and who understand. And we in turn can reach back and help those that are walking along the path behind us and let them know that they're not alone and give them hope that someday things will get better. I'll stop right there. But whatever your story is, I would encourage you to share it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Kelly. And the next one on our panel is Linda Carvelli, author of Perfectly Negative, How I Learned to Embrace Life's Lemons as Lessons. Her story chronicles a decade of overwhelming loss, some of which includes her parents and her only sister's death, all to cancer. After Linda's bout with the disease, and when she lost her 14-year career in corporate America, those events were the game changer and basis for Linda's path to a winning lifestyle. Linda.
Now can you hear me? Yeah? I think I have to do it.
Eat it.
So I thought I'd start by asking a question of myself that I get from a lot of people, and it really is about what made me decide to write, and then also what made me decide to publish, especially a memoir. I'll tell you that I've always liked to write, whether or not it was for work. I counted emails, I counted grocery lists, whatever it was, I did like to write a lot. And I wrote mostly in my journal, but what I noticed over many years was that I was only writing in my journal when life was hard. If I felt sad, mad, or confused about something. Unfortunately, or unfortunately in my case, for over 10 years, as Judith mentioned, after I turned 30, my life was very tragic, which meant I had a lot of journals, which is kind of a good thing for this. Aside from high school and college, I never attended any formal writing class until I was 40, right after my sister passed away. My writing instructor and fellow classmates gave me the courage I never knew I had and taught me the art of storytelling. Being surrounded by those passionate writers reminded me of a long forgotten goal I had to write a book. I never imagined, though, to Kelly, that my life would be the topic of this book. But as I continued to generate and share the material in my writing classes, I saw the impact that my story was having on my classmates, and I realized I may have a story to share that could help many more people who may be dealing with some of the painful things that I had dealt with. As Judith mentioned, some of the agony was the loss of my mom and my sister, both to breast cancer, and my dad also to cancer. He had lymphoma. I'm also a 14-year breast cancer survivor, and that comes along with a little bit of survivor guilt that I've learned to minimize on some days. But I also went through a non-amicable divorce, as if there's any other kind. I watched my cat be put to sleep, and I discovered my boyfriend cheating on me with his old girlfriend. That was all before I lost my 14-year corporate career, and I also had a second cancer scare. I suspected writing about the most painful events of my life would be emotional, but what I never anticipated was the personal transformation that I experienced. The first draft of my story may have been considered harsh and very depressing. In fact, the furthest example of inspiration and resilience, which is what I was trying to relay. When I reminded myself why I was writing the book, I became a little more aware of my thoughts, my actions, and my behaviors. And the end result is a memoir that's focused on a story of resilience. Not a story about being a victim, blaming others, or getting revenge. Of course, each of us lives through individual tragedy and losses. We all have a story. As I'm going through, or as we're going through those events, we're angry, we're sad, and in some cases we're depressed. But what I learned through the process of writing this book, and rewriting it many times, I discovered new ways of looking at negative situations. It was a truly powerful experience to have this shift in my mindset, and it happened because I allowed myself to feel and release the raw emotion in that first draft, step back, and see each situation through a different lens. It's a lens that some people call a learning lens. Now, even when I'm dealing with a challenge, I try to incorporate a learning lens all the time. Seeing each experience as an experiment. I try to figure out what worked, what I liked, what doesn't work, what I don't like, and and what I want to change for the next time I either have to make that same choice or a decision that I have to make. It's simple. Through this process, I became much more passionate about helping other people. So beyond publishing the book, I went back to school and became a certified life coach. While I continue to learn from all the changes that inevitably happen on a day-to-day basis in my own life, I'm really most grateful for the opportunity to help my clients discover new ways of looking at the difficult situations that they're facing. Together, we're able to create more options and plans for them to achieve their goals, and ultimately they find more confidence, courage, and peace in their own lives. And hopefully by me explaining a little bit about how I try to look through life with a learning lens, it may give you a little bit more idea of where I came up with the title for the book, which is Perfectly Negative. How I learned to embrace lemons as lessons. And for me, it's because I believe everything happens for a reason. I know that sounds cliche, but how I like to look at it now is everything happens for a reason. We just don't get the reason at the same time.
Thank you, Linda. And we have one more memoirist today. We have many in the ARIA, by the way, so when you finish here, you can go out and find all of us, but first of all, find us. And here are our books for sale here, and also out at our tables. Anyway, the next one up, the last one, will be Debbie Kamen-Tillinghast. She's the author of The Fairy Home. It's a memoir about her childhood on Prudence Island, which is located in Narragansett Bay off the coast of Bristol, Rhode Island. It took Debbie 60 years and a long walk one day where she decided to revisit her cherished memories destroyed when Hurricane Carol swept away her island way of life, forcing Debbie's family to relocate to the mainland. You're up.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. I thought today I would share with you what compelled me to write The Fairy Home, as well as a little bit of my Prudence Island history. I have a legacy of island living in my family. My grandmother was born on Block Island, and my mother was born on Patience Island, which is the tiny next-door neighbor to Prudence. And when she was born there were only 2 houses. So when it was time for her to go to school, the family moved to Prudence, and she attended the one-room schoolhouse there. She continued to grow up there year-round until she went off to high school and college. And then a few years later, she met and married my dad, and they moved back to Prudence Island to raise their family. And that's where my story begins. We lived on the island year-round. My mother became the teacher in that one-room schoolhouse, and my dad ran a store in the summertime. It was a wonderful place to be a child. Until 1954, when Hurricane Carol roared up the Atlantic coast and destroyed my dad's store. It changed our life forever. We moved off the island a year later, and I was 9 years old. Over the years, trips back to Prudence became infrequent. I grew up, went off to college, married, and had a family of my own. But Prudence Island still lived inside me. 11 years ago, when my mom died, I decided to return to the island in her memory. I became reacquainted with a childhood swimming buddy. And even though we hadn't seen each other for over 50 years, we picked up our friendship as if it had been yesterday. She and her husband still had a summer house on the island, and they invited me to come back as often as I wanted and to stay as long as I liked. It was a wonderful gift because I did keep going back to the island, and every time I went back, the pull was stronger, and every time I had to get on the ferry and go home, it was harder and harder. I had so many memories, and I wanted to ask my mom about her childhood memories, but I couldn't. Well, a few years later, I was walking one wintry day with my son Adam, and he said to me, "Are you okay, Mom? You don't seem quite yourself." And I said, "I'm fine, but I feel like there's something I'm supposed to do, and I don't know what it is. I think it's creative, but that's all I know, and it's driving me crazy." Well, a week or so after that walk, I went to my local library, and there was a bright yellow piece of paper on the circulation desk listing all the library activities for the month. But the only thing I saw were the words inside a little black box. And they said, "Memoir writing class, second Wednesday of the month." And I picked that paper up and something jiggled in my brain. And as I drove home, I thought what it would be like to share my island legacy for my children and my grandchildren. So I went to the next class and I listened. And then I went back a month later with one piece of handwritten paper about why I wanted to share my previous island story. And at the end of the class, the leader encouraged me to keep writing. And she said, "You need to write a book." So I kept going back, new stories every month. And after a year and a half, the very first page I had written became the first chapter in the Throne Home. And although I started this book for my children and grandchildren, at the end of my writing journey, I discovered I had found myself along the way.
Thank you. And thank you, ladies. And we're all stayed within our time. So if any of you have questions for us regarding any of the subjects, how to do it, or once you do write your memoir, what to do with it. Not everybody gets published traditionally. And as things are going on in the world of publishing, it's not such a bad idea to make your own path and self-publish. I certainly did it. And it means getting a cover designer and getting a good one and editing, and it's a whole other path. You can do it alone, or there are certainly companies that will help you do it. So does anyone have a question for any of us? Yes, Colleen.
So good. Can you hear me? Or should I go over and eat the mic? You said that you did your first draft and then you went over it and realized it was negative and so forth. Did you hire somebody to edit your work? And I know there are different, there's copy editors, line editors, all that.
Right. I use what he likes to be called the book architect. So he's a coach and an editor and an architect. So I met with him on the phone and we clicked, and he told me about his process for writing a book. And he believes that he goes by the 3-draft method, basically. And I can give you his name and everything afterwards. His main process really is just to write. The first draft is just writing. I didn't write it in chronological order. I just wrote scenes as I remembered them, and I would give them to him on a weekly basis. And he'd give me some feedback either on the writing itself or what he wanted more information on. Write a whole chapter just for your brother. I want to know more about him. That kind of stuff. After that first draft, we sat down, and I'm a project manager by trade, so I had everything in a spreadsheet, and all of the different scenes, all that were chapters and all that. And then he went through and he, together, identified what he likes to call series. And so it's things in the book that repeat. So I have several different things in the book that are sort of messages. And then the theme comes out. I didn't know what the theme of the book was until after I wrote that first draft. And that's when I came up with Everything Happens for a Reason. I just don't get the reason with the thing. The second draft is really about, then we decided what order to put it in at that point too. The second draft is really about going deeper into that and making sure that all of the scenes now support my theme. And then there's other things that we did too. So that's how.
So he was your go-to guy, this book architect, and is he Rhode Island?
He is in Rhode Island. He's in Providence. the best decision I ever made other than marrying my second husband.
And he is,
He's the reason that everything else happened in here.
I think just expounding on that a little bit, I also think it's a very good idea to get into a writing group. I prefer to get into a writing group when I pay for it, because I know the other writers in there are writing well and they're paying for it too. But you have to have a tough skin, because you wouldn't put your draft out there, or your first paragraphs, and people are not going to like it. It doesn't make any sense, and it made a lot of sense to you. So a very good thing is to get into a writing group and stay friends. And one of the first things you do in the critique is that you always try to find the best thing about the paragraph, or the chapter, and tell the writer that you like that. And then you say, oh, by the way, you could change this and you could change that. So that is a good way to start. Do we have any more? We have to have just a couple more questions. 5 minutes. No one. How many have started your memoirs, by the way? You have.
Supposedly life has a lot of twists and turns, which a lot of us do. When you do the memoirs, you concentrate on just the one thing and not follow through on the other turns.
The question was, if you have a lot of twists and turns in your life, where do you begin to write your memoir? Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
I mean, do you stick with one topic, or do you kind of just glance through all the things that happen to you?
You'll find that out once you write it. The most important thing is to begin writing and not think about how you're going to do it.
And that's what I meant by that first draft. Just write it, right?
Right.
And then try to make sense of it in chronological or whatever order that you're going to put it in. Or, like I said, that's where you might find a theme. You may find some piece that's similar and common throughout all of those little things. Just write.
Don't think about it.
That's what I tell everybody. Just write.
I would say theme is a 4-letter word. I struggle with, every memoir struggles with theme, but you have to have a theme. You have to have something, a thread that everything relates to, that you weave through your story. Because it's not an autobiography, right? It's not the story of your whole life. It's exactly like sitting up here and giving a 5-minute talk about writing your memoir. It's exactly that.
The hardest thing about writing this was writing this. Sum this up here.
So yeah, just pick one thing to start. If other things fall into place and relate to that, then yes, but everything should hang on something. Yeah?
Is that it? We have 5 minutes? Yes, one more. Yes. Oh, thank you. We'll take that. Yeah, thank you very much. We're ready to take this show on the road, so if you happen to want us to come and talk to your groups or whatever, let us know. Yeah. Thank you.
We'll all be out here in our booth, so if you have anything you want to talk to us about specifically, don't be shy.